Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is Austin here, bringing you some StarCraft 2 Legacy of the Void action for the first time in about a year. It seems like every May there's something of a reboot on my channel, which subsequently fizzles out, but I assure you, this time around it will not fizzle out. I am quite excited to be casting Legacy of the Void, and now that I am done school for the next few months, I believe I will aim to put out at least a few videos every week to try to revitalize the smaller scale StarCraft 2 commentary operation that has been my channel, and maybe even broaden its horizon a little bit. This particular match comes from the WCS Spring Championship, hosted at DreamHack Tours. It is the round of 32, a best of 5 series, and it is taking place on Runes of Endion between our red Protoss player, Harstem, who plays for Invasion Esports, positioned at the bottom left here, and his opponent, the Chinese player Jim, who plays for Invictus Gaming. I am still relatively new to Legacy of the Void. I figured the best way to get back into the swing of things and to really familiarize myself with this last expansion was just to cast as much as I could and play some ladder games as well. So do forgive me if I'm a little bit rusty or unfamiliar with some of the new units. I will certainly acclimatize over the next couple of games. I believe I was apologizing for this stuff for Heart of the Swarm last year, but again, this time around I am quite revitalized and committed to continuing to grow my channel and to put out active content, because I understand that's the key to engaging with an audience and providing entertaining media content. And it's unfortunate to have seen some of the big players in the StarCraft 2 scene drift away from it, like Total Biscuit, who I believe recently announced a desire to return to the game. Most notably Husky StarCraft, who has not put out a commentary for almost as long as I hadn't up until this point now. So I figured, why not take a crack at it, get back into a hobby I quite enjoyed for a few years, and see what I could do with it. So please feel free to leave any of your feedback, criticisms, suggestions for how I might go about getting to know Legacy of the Void. But do rest assured, I'm intimately familiar with StarCraft 2, having casted well over 100 games by now, both amateur and professional, and accordingly should not take very long, maybe 2 or 3 casts before I understand the swing of things. And I still very well understand the swing of things. I understand what a mothership core is. I understand even how to follow it in my interface, and I understand that Jim just made 2 adepts and has probably sent them right over here across the map, and they've shot out some shades and taken control of this Zelnaga tower using psionic transfer. And so the Adept seems like an interesting unit to me, another gateway unit, kind of a psionic gateway unit, which is a good concept. Certainly has some merit, because the Protoss were only really getting psi-based units with the Sentry, I suppose you could say, but I see the Sentries as somewhat synthetic units, not so much psi casters. Please tell me Sentries are in this expansion. Okay, very well they are. I would have felt quite uninformed had they been removed. So those Adepts are being dealt with, but the scouting has been accomplished for Jim, and he knows exactly what Harstem is up to, and Harstem is up to a couple of gates and warp gate tech. PvP has always been an interesting matchup for me, and it appears largely unchanged, because it's always the same in the production tab. Even if players are going for radically different strategies, when we're talking PvP, a radically different strategy ends up being one Phoenix being made by one player and not by the other. That's like, oh my god, he's completely taking another path up the tech tree. Unbelievable. He's sending in an Oracle, but which Jim is precisely doing at the moment, killing 2 probes in the process, and subsequently withdrawing his wonderful Heart of the Swarm originating Oracle unit. So a little bit of harassments being exchanged here, primarily one-sided in the favor of Jim. But you must remember, when a player is going about harassment and scouting so vigorously, they're not necessarily focusing as vigorously on the activities of their own economy and base. However, this is Jim we're talking about. He seems to know what he is doing and seems to be up to speed with his production in producing a unimmortal out of his robotics bay. Another hallucinated Phoenix from Harstem, revealing the position of this Oracle, which stalkers are trying to chase down without success. Harstem's just trying to scatter out his stalkers throughout his 2 bases to remain well defended against potential harassment. He's researching Blink as we speak, just as the first Oracle from Jim is about to finish. And these 2 players are on equal terms, expand-wise, and Jim is actually ahead in Harvesters, so I must retract that earlier statement that Jim is remaining focused. I retract the earlier statement that harassment distracts the player undertaking it, as though that is valid. In this case, Jim is ahead economically and appears to be holding his own in this game, which was game number 1, by the way, of a best of 5 series in the round of 32. So I suppose we can kind of account for this opening foray mindset as a stasis ward is placed by Jim's Oracle, and that ability is interesting, and I am learning about it on the fly. And it seems to have expanded the Oracle's ability to scout, to harass, to stall the opponent, as Jim places down his second expand third base a little bit after Harstem. Harstem did become something of a foreign force in Heart of the Swarm when I was last watching last summer, and it would seem that that reputation has persisted, if not strengthened, since I last touched base with the StarCraft 2 scene. We now see weapons level 1 coming out of both players, and this Oracle forever persisting as a thorn in the side of the red Protoss player, and quite an asset to the blue Protoss player, having racked up 2 kills. We have a small fleet of 5 Phoenixes massing for Jim, and he is continuing to produce more interesting strategy to accompany these Immortals with Phoenixes. Immortals now having a passive ability rather than that Hardened Shields, or well, it's an active ability, I guess. It's passively active, because they used to have Hardened Shields which didn't even have a trigger. It was just always active. This could be an alternate way of displaying it, but they did have abilities such as this in Heart of the Swarm that had a similar means of display, and Hardened Shield was just a passive. You couldn't actually mouse, like you could mouse over it, but it was faded out. You couldn't interact with it. I'll try to find another unit that has that. I mean, the Immortal was the one unit that did have it. No matter though. As you can see, I am learning my Legacy of the Void on the fly. Charge being researched by Harstem, and he's quite ahead of Jim on that front. Also on the front of the Templar Archive, so we will see some more Psi units than simply Adepts in the minutes to come. 3 more gateways being added by Harstem, and it looks like we have a stalemate of sorts. There's a feeble peace treaty in place, a ceasefire between our 2 Protoss factions, as they seek the best way to destroy their enemies. A stasis ward being placed by Jim's Oracle, and okay, so it's almost like a mine. It's just indefinitely placed. That hallucinated Phoenix will spot the Oracle. I don't believe it will spot the stasis ward, and it is cloaked. Okay, interesting and useful. I guess similar to a Whittle Mine and a Spider Mine in Brood War. And now these stalkers are going completely bonkers all over Harstem's third, as Psystorm is being researched, along with 2 photon cannons. We also have weapons level 2, Psystorm, Fleet Beacon, my apologies for Jim, as Psystorm continues for his opponent. And an Archon has been produced. So that is always a great way to employ your High Templars in a manner that is useful after you've gotten the Templar Archives. Otherwise, you're just sitting around waiting for Storm to finish, but it doesn't look like Jim is going to go that route. He's just going to transition over to the Fleet Beacon and use the Templars as a basis for Archon production. This is a smart idea. Usually it's a temporary measure, so I'm not quite sure why Jim opted for it. I know that... looks like there was a pause here, but I know that Archons are a decently wonderful addition to a Protoss Deathball in PvP, and I remember them quite well from my days in Heart of the Swarm, but it's interesting to see that he's not bothering to get a quite valuable research. And there, the army of Harstem is refueled, and I remember this ability too, forgive me. It is Revelation, of course. That was quite a revelation for Jim, being able to see his opponent's army and monitor them for some time thereafter. I think he'll come to understand that Harstem has researched Storm, as Jim offers Shields level 1. Go Shields level 1! I've always been a fan of that research. It's something of an underdog upgrade for Protoss, but it is useful overall when used in conjunction with ground weapons in PvP. Level 2 has completed for Jim. He's getting more High Templars and more High Templars and more High Templars, purely for the sake of Archons, which I suppose I've come to understand. He is also most notably constructing a mothership from his mothership core and right near his third base. I'm not sure if this is at all known to Harstem. Nope, he has not even seen the fleet beacon, and so he's going to have to assault somewhat blind. There's those charge lots attacking near the fourth base of Jim, and he will probably have to yield this base. This could be a crippling blow if it is forced to be cancelled, as Harstem is doing just fine with his fourth base. Some of those charge lots placed in stasis, but it is truly no matter as the Archons get to work and the storm-bearing High Templars await an opportunity to use the spell they have waited so long to use. Quite a number of Archons in Harstem's army, and we shall look at the army supply tab and see that it favors Harstem by 11. Jim realizing he's not soon going to be able to reestablish that fourth base, as he is currently 28 supply behind and geographically disfavored. He is soon going to be facing 2 disruptors out of Harstem's robotics base, or robotics facilities, my apologies. Weapons level 3 out of both players. Jim is ahead, but those weapons level 3 will not be available in the coming engage. We see some Archons exchanging very briefly with some of the ranged forces of Jim. A few feedbacks undertaken on the Phoenixes, 2 of which are quite damaged, the others largely unscathed. Revelation dropped on the army of Harstem, and I am a little bit behind on this, but as you can see, Jim has some vision which could prove useful. More merges undergoing, more Archons undergoing merge, more High Templars undergoing merges into Archons, as photon cannons are placed by Jim, but also by Harstem, who's now expanding to a 5th base. This 5th base, if held, since it is a gold, could decide the game. We see a massive engage, lots of feedbacks. The mothership making quite the difference, but that's a huge storm on the Archons. Chaos. As more storms are dropped on Jim, he is forced to withdraw temporarily. Every second that his forces remain within those psi storms, they take more and more damage. Now, some hesitance out of both sides. There is the time warp placed by, I believe it was Jim. You'd have to, don't quote me on that one. We see more storms falling upon the forces of Jim. Blade forward by Harstem, quite aggressive, looking to take down this mothership without success. A storm is thrown at the Immortals and Archons of Jim, but it looks like that massing of Archons was a smart idea, as a number of them are still standing, if even with low shields. And it looks like Jim tentatively was able to win that engage against Harstem, preventing the critical 5th gold base from being established. We see a Warp Prism, another Archon, a couple Disruptors coming for each player. Well, the Warp Prism and the Archons for Jim, and then the Disruptors for Harstem. Harstem a little bit hesitant. It looks like he did lose that engage, and now is behind 18 supply. Shields level 2 almost finished for Jim, so he does have a critical 2 upgrade advantage on his opponent, and he also has 3 weapons in contrast to 2. Harstem, you had the economic advantage, you had the geographic advantage. Why couldn't you have researched a little bit more? We now see Harstem trying to press the advantage here. He does have the high ground and is using it accordingly. Mothership going to work as the Phoenixes try to provide air superiority, but these Disruptors are preparing their Purification Novas for their enemies, and there is one as we speak, dealing its damage as one of them is brought up by the Graviton Beam, but not destroyed. His 5th base is trying to be established. Here is another engage. One of the Disruptors destroyed. There is the Revelation. Jim is pressing forward relentlessly into the cannon lines of Harstem. This is not exactly the best idea, considering he is quickly being repelled by the Immortals of his opponent. And it looks like that was a relatively even engage. Jim wants to end this right here, right now. He was able to destroy the 5th, but these 2 players are deadlocked in a stalemate, and now it looks like Jim is trying to build that gold base. I'm telling you, whoever is able to hold the gold base until completion will win the game. First, main base mineral lines are almost completely dried up, and expands are slowly drying up as well. Even the 3rd bases are starting to become depleted, so this base is essential. Harstem may well try to establish a new operation at the top left, but the gold is the gold. It will yield a lot more minerals for an equivalent amount of effort and probe resources, and accordingly should be fought over by both players. Another few graviton, what are these? Purification Novas, there we have it. I will memorize the names in short time. Purification Novas shot out as a little bit of a poke from Harstem. Now the charge lots are attacking, but the Archons are the precise counter to those units, just as Jim came to experience with that single charge lot there. Another Purification Nova, picking off a Zealot. And we do now have a full engage. It looks like Harstem is trying to get us around without success. A lot of feedbacks just executed. The Mothership's still standing for Jim. He's advancing a little bit far, but he's trying to claim the victory right here, right now, as an Archon is lost to him. Harstem is far ahead in supply and army supply with it. Jim does have the high ground, and he does have the Mothership. Detection is no longer an issue for Harstem. The Mothership has been destroyed, but Jim has this nice critical massing of Immortals. Will it be enough? There are Disruptors from Harstem moving forward, and a number of charge lots being spawned, trying to cripple these Immortals. Here are High Templars moving in, quickly merging into Archons, but it looks like Harstem is dealing a decisive blow to his foe, advancing on this 5th base, taking out the remainder of Jim's army, and quickly claiming the game for his own. There is the GG. Our Netherlands Protoss player does claim game number 1 of this series, and also game number 1 of my return to StarCraft 2 commentary, specifically Legacy of the Void. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this cast. Rest assured, I will improve in the coming videos. My knowledge and my nomenclature will improve in the coming videos, and I hope you will join me for those. This is Austin from Aus77SC, signing out.